Hope you enjoy part 2. The next morning came bright and early, everyone felt a sense of calm. Harry woke refreshed for the first time as long as he could remember. Maybe back in first year, those first few months when all he had to worry about was schoolwork. That quickly changed, and it seems that he had been fighting for his life ever since. Pushing those thoughts away for now, he got up and prepared for the day, glad that the room had a bathroom. He made his way to the ground floor, then realized he had no idea where the kitchen was. He listened and heard laughter, so he followed the sound. When he came to the kitchen, he saw 3 people, sitting at the table with Sirius, that he didn't know. There was an older woman with long curly dark hair. She wore respectable baby blue, woman's business suit. Next to her was an older man with light brown hair, who was also dressed for the office, only in black. On the other side of the table was a younger woman, in Gothic-like clothes, with pink hair. Sirius, who was sitting next to the pink-haired lady, saw him and smiled. "Harry, meet the Tonkses," he said, waving to the group. "This is Andy, Ted, and Tonks. I won't say her first name, I like my balls where they are." He chuckled as he ducked her swat. Harry gave him a queer look, but he entered the room without commenting on those words of wisdom. He remembered that Sirius had mentioned something about that the night before. "A pleasure to meet you all," he said, sitting next to his godfather. "They're going to stay here over the summer," Sirius explained. "Oh," Harry inquired, looking at the family again. "Yeah, Ted feels it's easier than sending post back and forth," the dogman added, serving up some coffee. "He wants to talk to you to get your story recorded for his files." "Oh, okay, sure. That sounds reasonable," the boy answered as his breakfast appeared, via Dobby. "Andy's going to help me teach you everything you need to know about your legacy. We'll get you up to snuff before the end of summer," his godfather said, nodding to his cousin, who nodded back. "Sounds good," Harry said, then started on his breakfast. "She's also going to teach you to dance," Sirius added, right as Harry bit into his eggs. Harry spewed his eggs across the table. "What?" he choked out, coughing a bit. Dobby and Creaker popped in and snapped their fingers to clear the mess. Dobby took care of Harry, and Creaker did the rest. Meanwhile, everyone at the table laughed at the sputtering boy, while Sirius pounded him on the back. It was to this funny scene the rest of the teens walked into. "What's so funny?" Ron asked as he took a seat next to Harry, Hermione next to him. "Harry's going to learn to dance," Tonks stated, handing Harry a napkin, which he took thankfully. "Why is that funny?" Hermione inquired, leaning over and glancing at the still choking boy. "It's his reaction that's hilarious," Sirius said with a laugh, still thumping Harry's back. "Why did I need to learn how to dance? Is there going to be another ball?" "Merlin, I hope not," Harry choked out, waving Sirius off now that he could breathe, sorta. He picked up a glass of water and swallowed it down in a few gulps. "It's part of learning how to behave like the upper class. You will be attending balls, galas, and such. I heard about how the Yule Ball went. I won't have you embarrassing yourself again," Sirius stated, sobering up at the seriousness. "If what I heard was right, you need to send a letter to that young lady and apologize," he said, looking at Harry as if to make sure he didn't deny the fact that he had messed up. Harry blushed deeply. He knew he had made a fool of himself, not to mention his date. "All right," he sulked, slipping down his chair. "I'll send an owl after breakfast," he promised. It was the least he could do. "Ron," Fred said, looking at his blushing brother, "you should do the same." "Yeah," George agreed, "your date was even worse than Harry's." "I agree," Ginny added her 2 newts worth. You ignored her the entire time you were there, she added hotly. Fine, grumbled the redhead, slouching down in his chair in embarrassment. Don't worry, Harry, Andy said, reaching over and patting his hand, I'll be gentle while teaching you to dance. I can help you with your letter as well. You too, Mr. Weasley. Bring them to me when you're done with them and I'll look them over. All right, Harry said again, still slumped down. Okay, agreed the still disappearing Ron. Harry, did you write your bid for the article? Ted asked, peering over his cup at the teen. Yeah, the boy replied sadly, sitting up a bit. I mostly wrote about Cedric. I thought he was more important than people seeing me in a good light. I'll get it to you after breakfast, Harry promised, taking a bite of his toast. You're a good boy, Andy said with moist eyes. Once more, reaching over and patting his hand. He deserves better, was all Harry would say, though he did give her a sad smile. Ron gripped his shoulder, and Hermione reached around Ron and rubbed Harry's back. The other Weasleys gave supporting smiles, and Fred lifted his cup in salute. They all remembered the great person Cedric was. He hadn't lived far from the burrow, so they grew up neighbors, playing together as children. To the Weasleys, he was a friend that was sorely missed. They too thought it was a great injustice that his death was glossed over. They were proud that Harry was going to give their friend words of kindness and remembrance. Sirius, I just thought of something, Tonks said, turning towards the man in question. Why do you have a hippogriff in your mum's old room? How did you know about Buckbeak? Sirius asked, sipping his tea. Oh, I heard him this morning and went to check it out. Your mum was yelling and cussing up a storm. Can't say I miss that, she grumbled, remember all the times she tripped over the troll-leg umbrella stand, making the portrait wake up and start yelling and screaming. She shook her head and got back to her point. Anyway, you should set him free. He's not looking good, she said calmly, not in a demanding way. You're probably right. I'll see to it after breakfast, her cousin said, taking a small bite of eggs, and then swallowing. He's there because he, along with Harry and Hermione, rescued me from being kissed, he added, putting his fork down. I didn't let him go before, because Malfoy's put a hit on him. I don't want him to die. I doubt very seriously that many can tell one hippogriff from another. Especially, the likes of Malfoy. Why don't you see if you can't get him to go elsewhere, like Ireland or someplace, if you're that worried, Tonks replied, then started her own breakfast. Yeah, I'll try that, the head of the house said, then the table went quiet as they finished their meal. Harry quickly finished his breakfast and went to get the article he wrote, then he went back upstairs to write to Parvati Patil. He made sure to say that he was sorry, and that he'd try to make it up to her. Not that he thought he could, she had been pretty upset with him. He only hoped he phrased it right, he didn't want her to think that he was interested in dating. The last thing he needed was a girlfriend. Not right now, maybe after the war. Meanwhile, Sirius went to the master bedroom. His hearing was bombarded with the yells of his mum. The first thing he did was silence her picture, then he noted, as he took a good look around, that Buckbeak had shredded everything. He smirked at the destruction. His mum spent a small fortune on the scrap. She must be pissed over it all. All the fine furniture was now a huge mess. Blood and animal bones were strewed about the place from his meals. The hippogriff had made quite a nest with all the bedding, bed curtains, and mattress filling. It was rank in the room, since he couldn't exactly walk the beast. The elves banished the leavings, but the smell remained. The little guys didn't stick around long, since they were on the menu. It was a toss-up for a while who came and who didn't. Kreaker finally settled it with a rotating schedule. Sirius looked at the poor animal, who was molting where he had feathers and dull where fur was. His wings hung limply on the floor, like two wet blankets. It was a sad sight. The poor thing gave a pitiful cry, raising his head to see who came in. "Don't worry, Buckbeak, I'll get you out." "It was selfish of me to keep you here this long," Sirius said, bowing to the once majestic creature. Buckbeak bowed his head back since he was still laying on the floor. Sirius went up to him and petted his long neck. He thought about what he could do, and he talked to the hippogriff on what should happen. Buckbeak seemed to be paying attention, nodding in all the right places and narrowing his eyes at things he didn't like. Like the name Malfoy. Soon the two hashed it out and Sirius called Dinky to take the great beast to the Forbidden Forest. Buckbeak would then fly as far away from the UK as he could and settle elsewhere. Dinky followed the man's instructions, by bowing to the huge animal. When Buckbeak bowed back, Dinky put his hand on the hippogriff's head and they disappeared. Sirius was sad to see him go, but it was the right thing to do. Once the animal was gone, he looked around the room. It was destroyed, far beyond what the elves could fix. Gouges were in the floor and the walls, where the hippogriff had lashed out. Nothing was left untouched. Except his mum's portrait, which was weird. Maybe Buckbeak liked the company. That thought made him shudder, as if anyone could like that shrew. Not even his father could stand the woman. He noted his silenced mother screaming wordlessly. He smirked. "Goodbye, mother," he said cheerfully as he left the room. "Enjoy your stay," he added as he closed the door. The spell would wear off in time. Until then he called Winky. "Master is needing Winky," the female elf asked, curtsying. She was still dressed in a clean white tea towel that had a black family crest on the front. As were all the elves, except Kreaker, who preferred a pillowcase, though it too had the emblem. It looked like a toga dress, with a small metal clip on the shoulder. She appeared happy and satisfied with life. "Yeah, I want you to go into that room," he said, pointing to the room in question, "and clean up anything that is disgusting. Blood, bones, animal droppings. Don't worry, Buckbeak is gone. However, I want you to leave the mess of furniture for now. I'll replace it later. I want my mum to see all her nice things reduced to kindling," he ordered gently, though a vindictive smirk played on his lips. "Is master sure? Winky can clean it all up." "It is being no problem," the elf fretted at the thought of leaving a mess behind. "No, leave it for now," he reiterated. "As master wishes," she sighed and went to follow the order. Sirius then went to seek out Harry. He knew that his godson had a letter to write, but he should be done with that by now. So, he wandered around, and just basked in the clean house. He finally stumbled onto the teens, all sitting in the library doing summer homework. The twins were bent over the same book, each making different notes. Hermione, Ron, and Harry were discussing history with Ginny for her homework. "Fred, or George, one of you needs to flu your dad. It's Saturday, so you need to call home," Sirius stated as he took a seat near Harry. "Righty-o," Fred said, standing and stretching. "George will stay here and finish this." "I'll be back in a jiff," the oldest teen said as he waved to everyone over his shoulder, seeing himself out of the room. "You are doing your homework, right?" Hermione asked George, but Harry answered. "Not your place, Hermione," the dark-haired teen said with a small smile, tapping her arm with his finger. He knew his friend was trying not to be bossy, but he felt that she needed encouragement. The two in the room looked at him as if he had done something that just wasn't done. Sorry, George. I meant to say. If you'd like help researching something, homework-wise, I'd be more than happy to help, the bushy-haired girl stated after a moment's thought. No worries, Hermione, we've got this. Thanks for the offer though, George said, going back to his book. What did you do? Ginny whispered furiously to the boys. Nothing much, Ron answered, rubbing his nose. Just talked is all, Harry added, patting Hermione on the arm. They might have been a bit blunt, but I think it's what I needed to hear, she said with a small sad smile. What do you mean? Ginny asked, looking at her friend with a confused tilt of her head. Well, Hermione started, thinking for a second, I know that you and the twins think that I'm a bit pushy, she said, making the younger girl blush. Well, Ginny said, looking around the room for inspiration, finding none she went with the truth, maybe a little. It's okay, her friend said, patting her arm, my parents have been telling me for years that I need to tone down. It's only after these two pointed it out that I figured maybe they were right. If my friends, who like me, think I'm being overbearing, and my parents, well they can't all be wrong. So, what? You're going to not nag anymore? Ginny asked, then blushed again at the look the boys gave her. Oh, I'll still nag, and state my opinions, Hermione said, I'll just try to be nicer about it. Well, good luck with that, George said, looking up from his parchment. Thanks, I think, Hermione said, not sure if he was serious or not. Hermione, Ron said, pulling her attention to him, I know I've been a right Burke sometimes, what with wanting you to do my homework and such. What I'm trying to say is, sorry, and you can tell me to piss off, if you want, he finished, looking in her eyes to show he was serious. Me too, Harry said, laying his hand on her arm. Okay, I will, she said, with an evil smirk. Both boys groaned, but soon they were all laughing when Ginny started giggling. Harry, got a moment? Sirius called from his chair, after he watched them interact. He was glad to see that they were getting along and really hoped that they three remained friends for a long time. Yeah. I'm done with my homework for today. I'll finish the rest tomorrow, he replied, getting up and joining his godfather. What do you need Harry for? Hermione asked, eager to help. Nothing that concerns any of you, Sirius stated, firmly. Just house stuff, he added for those that knew what he was talking about. Leave it, Hermione, Ron said, taking a book and pointing to a sentence on the page. Help me with this, yeah, he asked, diverting her attention. The two set about finishing Ron's homework, while Harry and Sirius talked about house stuff. Fred came back in all smiles, so everyone assumed all was well at the burrow. Everything all right at home, his twin asked, showing him the notes he'd made while the other was gone. Mum's in a right snit, Fred answered jovially, taking the parchment and looking it over, nodding to himself at what he read. I'm not sure that's something to be happy about, Hermione said, delicately, as if not to step on toes. Sometimes, I think she's only happy when she has something to harp about, Fred rebutted as he settled near his twin. He's right, Hermione, Ron added, shuffling his parchments together and shoving them in his bag. She finds stuff to snip about when there's nothing going on. Yeah, Ginny put in her 2 newts worth. She does seem happier when she's bossing everyone around. Why is she in a snit? Sirius asked, lifting his head from where he and Harry's were huddled down to chat. Last he had heard, Arthur was keeping her calm. Dad told her we'd be staying here. She wants us home, but Dad said we're to stay here. She's arguing with him about it, but even Dumbledore agrees that we'd be safer here. Well, he wants to be here too, but there you are, Fred said cheerfully. Oh, well, as long as it isn't important. Your dad is the head of house, after all, the dogman said, and bent back down to finish his talk with his godson. There was nothing Hermione could say to that, so she sighed and went back to her homework. The twins nodded and they went back to their work. Ginny finished her assignment with Ron and Hermione's help. Sirius and Harry spent an hour going over do's and don'ts of meeting people. Harry knew a bit, since it didn't differ much from what he'd been taught about meeting royalty, lords and ladies and such. The Dursleys always did hold themselves above their station. They would go on and on that one day they'd be gentry. Not bloody likely, but still he had had to spend hours rehearsing what he would have to do, if ever one came to the house. So, he didn't embarrass them, of course. Either they got it wrong, or wizards did it a little differently. Stuffier. Still, it was pretty much the same thing. They then went to dance lessons, which Hermione was roped into. Harry stumbled about and stepped on the poor girl's toes. They were to dance for a few minutes so Andy could assess Harry's performance. If this is what your date went through, I can see why she was embarrassed, she grumbled, taking a step back and wiggling feeling back into her toes. Sorry, Harry mumbled, rubbing the back of his head. Don't worry, Harry, you'll learn soon enough, Andy said, coming up to the two friends. What should I do? He asked, ignoring his laughing red-headed friend and godfather. Good thing the twins weren't there. Ginny was there, but she was smacking her brother, while trying not to laugh. You need to learn to listen to the music, the older woman offered, holding her hands in a dance position. Take my left with your right, and vice versa, she instructed as she started swaying in time to the beat. Not greatly, just gently side to side. She hoped he would get the rhythm, and it seemed to work, minutely. He did as she bid, swaying along with her, and then he felt a small tug from her right hand as she stepped back, and so he followed. Soon enough he was dancing well, for being led. However, when it came time for him to lead, he was all left-footed again. Much to the displeasure of his partners. Hermione glared as her toes were once again crushed, and then took the lead, directing him verbally into the steps that needed to be made. He didn't even chastise her for it, since she was in a teaching position. It was a grueling hour, but soon it was time for dinner. They all trooped to the kitchen and sat around the table, where they were joined with the rest of the house, waiting for the elves to serve. Conversation was light, until Ted dropped a bombshell, right as the food was served. Sirius, I've talked to a business partner of mine, he says he can get you free without a trial, the man stated calmly, but some could see a small smirk play at the side of his mouth. What? Came the collective reply as everyone, except Andy, stopped serving themselves and gawked at the smug man. Since you didn't have a trial, and you were held for 12 years without one, he feels he can make a case of gross miscarriage of justice and criminal neglect, the solicitor said. Taking a sip of tea. Ted, quit teasing and just get on with it, Andy said, smacking her husband's arm. Really? Came the desperate question of a desperate man. Truly, was the firm reply. Do you hear that, Sirius? You might be free. And there's nothing anyone can do about it? Harry exclaimed, throwing his napkin down and getting up to hug the man in question from the back, while Sirius just stared in stunned silence. What about my escape? Sirius asked suddenly, hoping for good news there. A happy Harry once again took his seat, staring between the two as to not miss a word. The rest of the table did the same. He feels that he can argue that you were never meant to be there in the first place, Therefore, there is no escape, Ted said, with a wry smile. My animagus form. Pay the fee, you've already served the time, Ted said, still smiling. You're not having me on, right? This is real. Sirius asked, just to be sure. Yes, the man affirmed. Talk to Harold Waters, Esquire, tomorrow, via the flug, and he will set up everything. You're going to have to tell him everything, from the night the Potters died, he gave an apologetic look to Harry, to the night you wound up in prison. I can do that. I'll take Veritaserum, came the eager reply. That might help, Ted said, putting his napkin down and taking up his cup. Whatever it takes. Wonderful. I've left his name and flu address on your desk. Call him in the morning. He's expecting you around 9. I'll do that. Thanks, Ted, you can't know how much this means to me, Sirius said, seriously. He stood up, reached over the table, grabbed the man's hand and shook it strongly. You may be right, since I've never been in your shoes. Still, it was the least I could do, what with you bringing us back into the family, the man stated as fact, patting their linked hands and then disengaged. Yes, it is what family does, Andy added, gripping her husband's hand in thanks. I'll remember this for the rest of my life, the relieved man said to his family. He was glad he brought them back. Not just because of this, but because they lined up with his way of thinking. It was good to be around people he loved, and who loved him back. It was the best thing he did, getting rid of Molly and inviting the Tonkses. The rest of the table congratulated Sirius and dinner went on. Things were quiet that night, as everyone mulled over the news that Sirius could once again be free. Sirius, himself, was holed up in his study, going over everything in his mind and writing it all down. He made sure to add everything that had been happening since he escaped too, just in case. He put in his notes the things that the ministry had done, and said, to and about him. He included the newspaper articles that claimed that he snuck into the ministry and clogged the pipes. There were others, but he wanted to point out just how inept Fudge was. Then he had a thought, he could use this opportunity to help his godson. He was going to ask about the man representing Harry while he was at it. It was an affront to the House of Black and Potter, the way he and his heir was treated by the government. He wrote all that Harry and his friends had told him had happened to Harry, the years at Hogwarts, the threats, the ridicule, everything. Especially the Triwizard Tournament, and what happened at the end. If the lawyer thought Harry was lying, then he would chuck it all and find someone else. If one lawyer could see a case, then he was sure there would be others. He hoped it didn't come to that, but if it did, he'd put Harry first. He did have a fleeting thought that maybe he should read the book he gave Hermione, to see if there was any dirt on this Waters guy. But if the guy was on the up and up, then that might do more harm than good. Still, he'd ask the girl about what she found, since he knew she would disregard his words and read it as soon as she could. Bookworms were just wired that way. The next morning, after breakfast, while Sirius was talking to Waters, the Golden Trio were in Harry's room again, since it was more private and nicer. Harry's two friends were a bit miffed that they had to be with Harry each time they came, since the room would not register in their minds until Harry mentioned it. Hermione was especially upset about this, because there were many times she wanted to talk to Harry, but couldn't remember where he was. Right now, they were discussing Sirius and the great news. Each hoping for the same outcome. That Sirius would be free. They too went over the night they had found out about Pettigrew, to make sure that it was fresh in their minds. That way, if they got called on, they would remember what happened that night. Hermione was very good at reminding them what happened. Ron had been in so much pain that his memories were foggy. Harry had been so angry that night that his were muddled too. But Hermione has a very logical mind that helped her refresh their memories. Harry, Hermione started after they were done, do you think Sirius could get you represented? She inquired, tilting her head to the side a bit, unknowingly echoing Sirius' thoughts. I don't know, maybe. It would be nice to have a legal representative in my corner. I mean, Ted's a great solicitor, but I might need to have a court lawyer to help with all this ministry stuff, he answered thoughtfully, going into the same frame of mind as Sirius. And thinking of jotting all his woes down on paper. Do you really think that they are out to hush you up? Hermione asked softly, taking it in this time. If they really were after Harry, she'd have to do some major research just to have some facts on their side. Laws change over the years and she didn't want to have second-hand misinformation. She wasn't an attorney, but she could help with research. Don't know, Harry shrugged, liking how she was taking it seriously. He really loved the thought that she was in his corner. For all her faults, Hermione was his friend, and she was scary smart. Do you want to take the chance? He asked, looking at her to see her reaction. No, she answered, shaking her head. I'll start my research today, she added, giving him a small smile. Thanks, Hermione. I don't say it enough, but you are a lifesaver and I'm glad to have you as a friend, Harry said, giving her a one-armed hug. She smiled at him and returned the hug, then picked up a Muggle notepad to start taking down things she might need to read. She knew that the library was open, and that Sirius said that she could do some research, so that made her more determined. She also knew that there were books she would not be able to read, but maybe she could ask Tonks or Mrs. Tonks to help. Maybe you should write it all down, Ron said as if reading Harry's mind. That way if this Waters bloke needs it, you have it all prepared. That's a brilliant idea, Ron, Hermione agreed, flipping to a new page in her notebook. She poised her pen to take down things in chronological order when Ron made her pause. Don't need to sound so surprised, the redhead grumbled, rubbing his nose, and glaring at her. I'm not, she protested, settling back in her chair, dropping her pen in her lap. Sure sounded like it, came the annoyed comeback. Stop, you two, Harry spat, not wanting what had so far been a good morning to be ruined by these two bickering. Ron, she was probably startled that she didn't come up with it. Hermione, you did come off as a bit condescending, he said, looking with narrow eyes at each person as he named them. Sorry, both teens mumbled, then Hermione held up the pen as if to say, let's do this. Harry quirked an eyebrow and then they got busy. It took hours, with contributions from all involved, for them to get it all on parchment. They finished and headed down the stairs to talk to Sirius. It was after 10, so they thought he'd be done by now. Sirius, Harry called as he knocked on the study door, are you there? Come in, came the cheerful reply. Harry and his friends trooped in and took seats around the room. What's up, kids? The man asked, sitting behind his desk with a full-on grin. How did your talk go? Harry inquired, setting the notebook down on the coffee table. Great, he says he's going to get my story in the paper the day he files his grievances. He said that way they can't cover it up. Well, they could, but it would make them look bad. And the ministry doesn't like to look bad, the cheerful man answered, his grin never leaving his face. Won't they look bad anyway? Sending an innocent man to prison, Hermione wanted to know. Sure, but they can pass the canute on that one. Tell everyone it wasn't them, and such, Sirius explained. After all, it was Bagnold, Crouch and Dumbledore that dropped that quaffle. If they had done their jobs, I wouldn't have spent more than a day in a holding cell. But Crouch hated me, and my family. Bagnold was just ineffective, one of the reasons we were losing so badly. Dumbledore, well, I'm not sure of his actions, or inactions, as the case may be. Stupid old man, Harry grumbled under his breath. Sirius smiled at him and nodded. Oh, I guess that makes sense. When is all this going to happen? Ron asked, itching to ask about Harry being represented. That grin got bigger. Tomorrow. Wow, so fast, Harry gasped, happy that his godfather might be a free man soon. Money talks, the man said, his grin turned into a smirk. Hermione was going to rebut that, but she knew that it was true. Even in the non-magical world, those who had money had power. She didn't like it, but that is the way the world worked. So instead she said, I know what you mean. Look at Malfoy. You're right on that, Harry agreed with a grimace. Do you think he can take on Harry's case? Ron asked, not waiting a moment longer. He knew all too well that those without money had little say in how the world worked. He really didn't want to have that discussion. I asked, but Harry doesn't really have a case, per se, he has concerns, Sirius explained, his grin falling a little. That didn't help his frame of mind. He really wanted Harry to have a good life. He was waiting to be free to do the adoption, then Harry would never have to go back to those horrible people again. What do you mean? Harry asked, his brow wrinkled in thought. I mean, he can do something about the Prophet, but Ted has already compiled what is needed, and the article will rebut anything they say. What Waters can do is keep track of everything and see if he can make a case. That, and he's going to make sure the Prophet prints what he tells them to, Sirius answered, leaning back and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He was getting a headache, his emotions kept jumping all over the place. How's he going to do that? Ron wanted to know. I have shares, the happy man stated, sitting up again. Oh, was the answer. So, what else did you talk about? Harry inquired, hoping to change the subject. Well, he said that Ted is going to appeal for you to get the Order of Merlin, first class for your fighting the basilisk. That's one story that was never covered up, just downplayed, he stated happily, his smile back full force. What on earth would I do with one of those? Harry asked, completely bewildered. It'll give you a seat on the Wizengamot, for one, Ron said, thinking things through as quickly as possible. And it'll stop people from calling you a liar. I mean, you can easily show them the corpse, if it came down to it. Doesn't he already have a seat? Hermione asked, tapping her chin, also going over what it could mean. No, the Potters were wealthy, no doubt, but they never had a seat on the Wizengamot. Only official Wizengamot employees, scribes, and such, head of departments in the ministry, special advisors like Malfoy, senior aurors, holders of the Order of Merlin, first and second class. And those that the minister grants, read bribes. Most of those families are dark, like mine. We're members of the 28, so we were granted seats ages ago, like most families on the Wizengamot. How do you think all those ridiculous laws got passed? The dark and neutral outweigh the light, Sirius answered, rubbing his goatee. So, does that mean when you get free, you'll be sitting there? Harry asked, thinking of all the good things he could do by accepting. Yes, but I'll have to debate with the likes of Malfoy though, the tired man said, once more trying to get his headache to ease. Malfoy, Ron grumbled. Yep, they are also part of the sacred, but they really don't hold much influence, Sirius said, gleefully. He has to bribe for anything he wants. Rumor has it that he lines Fudge's pockets. I'm waiting until all that gold runs out. Now with you-know-who back, that might happen quickly. War isn't cheap. It's cheaper when you don't have to pay your soldiers, Harry said, thinking of all the Death Eaters enslaved to the man. Instead of getting paid, they were paying to be tortured. A funny thought came to his mind as they all lined up to get their bags of gold, dressing in full Death Eater regalia, and getting blasted with the Cruciatus curse as it was handed to them. He chuckled a bit, but he waved of the looks of inquiry. He didn't think they'd find it funny. Well, not Hermione. Here's what we've written up about Harry's years at Hogwarts, Hermione said, reaching over and picking up the notebook and handing it to Sirius. I've also found a few things that could help you from that book you gave me. I didn't read it before bed, well not after the boys talked to me, but I did get up early and have a peek. What sort of things? Sirius asked, taking the notebook. He gave it a queer look, then started flipping through it. He marveled at the thin paper, and how neat Hermione's handwriting was. He was glad it wasn't Harry's, that boy's writing is atrocious. Well, it's mostly muggle baiting, and affairs and such, but the Malfoys used to deal with the royal family. There's even rumor, sustained by fact, that one tried to marry a queen. They started politics in the wizarding world when we went into hiding, bribing, and funding campaigns, things of that nature. That might be why they don't hold much weight in the Wizengamot, she added smugly. What? Ron exclaimed, sitting up straight in shock. The Malfoys dealt with muggles? Wow, I never would have thought that. This tidbit of information could be used to taunt Malfoy Jr. He could just see that ferret's face when he asked about that. Maybe he should get Harry to teach him the Patronus, he would use that memory. No, she right. I vaguely remember all that coming up when Narcissa married Lucy. My mother didn't want the marriage, because old Lucy wasn't in good standing. He's bribed his way into everything, though, so my father agreed to it. He felt the man was Slytherin, through and through, Sirius stated thoughtfully, like reaching for an old memory. His parent fought over that one. However, since they were only the aunt and uncle, it didn't matter what they thought. Malfoy mean bad faith in French. So that is probably why they were in England to begin with, they pissed someone off there and were exiled. That branch anyway, Hermione added a bit gleefully. Wow, I never knew all that. I mean, I should have looked it all up, what with me and Draco being enemies, Harry said with a grin. Like Ron, he was thinking of how he could use this to his advantage. How did they become part of the Sacred 28, if they're from France? Ron wanted to know. I don't know, they must have come over early enough to have been counted, or they just have that long of a lineage, she answered, thinking hard on what little she knew. It's the lineage, I'll wager, Sirius said, he too thinking hard. That and whoever dreamed up the Sacred 28, only added pure blood that never married beneath them. So, it wouldn't matter if they were French or not, they were in Britain and pure. That's why the Potters aren't on there, he added, trying to remember which family started it all. While all this is well and good, how does it help us? Harry asked, getting back to the matter at hand. It doesn't really, but I thought you'd like to know, Hermione conceded with a bit of a huff. Back to Harry's case, it's a good thing you wrote all this down. Waters asked me to get you guys to do that, Sirius said, thumbing through notebook again. He might read it before handing it over. If he could get free, he'd try and get custody of Harry, get the blood adoption done and over with. Harry would still be James' kid, but he needed someone in his corner that couldn't be removed. The Black family, while not large, had a great amount of pull in the ministry. That, and if he made them look good, but blaming the last regime, then he could use that over Fudge's head. Maybe the man would get his head out of his arse. He still wasn't sure what to do about Dumbledore. As far as he had reach, Dumbledore's reach was far longer. Though, he did have more money than the old man. What about Harry's family? Hermione asked delicately. She noticed Harry grimace, and shot him a concerned look. I've already pointed Waters to the Dursleys, Sirius said, giving Harry a slightly pitying look. That's going to take longer, since there really was no evidence, and he'll have to go Muggle, he added, looking at his hands for a moment, and picturing them around that uncle's fat neck. He wasn't sure there would be a case on them. From what Harry had told him, they were very good at hiding the abuse. He was sure the Dursleys had covered everything up by now. Still, just in case, he was going to have Harry write all that down too. After all, there was still the holes in the wall from the bars. Maybe they were stupid enough to not cover that up. An out of sight, out of mind type thing. Sirius started reading the first page of notes. He asked some clarifying questions, and they chatted over the words a bit. After about an hour and a half, Sirius decided that Harry needed more lessons, and sent the other two away, until it was time for dance lessons. Ron and Hermione, seeing they weren't needed, decided to see what everyone else was up to and went to find the other teens. Sirius, Harry said, when his friends left, are we going to do the adoption before or after you're free? Well, we can wait, but I want to do it before I leave this house. Malfoy might be after me, he still thinks his prog is going to inherit, he said, his headache getting worse at that thought. Oh, okay, Harry said slowly, not wanting to think about that. Okay, let's get started on this. I have a headache and want to take a nap, Sirius said, rubbing his forehead. Harry slumped in his chair and glared at his godfather. Why do I have to learn all this stuff again? It's not like I'm going to use it anytime soon, he asked mulishly, arms folded in defiance. You might not need it now, but isn't it better to know than to be caught unawares? Especially if you're going to get an Order of Merlin, Sirius returned, putting the recount of Harry's years aside, and getting up to get a book from the shelf. He took it and returned to his chair. He then handed it over to Harry. This is the book I learned from. It's got some cutthroat things in it, that you can take or leave. What it will do is give you an edge. You said you were almost sorted into Slytherin, maybe it's time to let a bit of that snake out. I know I am. He grinned, then rubbed his forehead again. He didn't know why his head was aching, and as soon as he thought of it, he called Creaker. Master calls, the elf grumbled. I need a headache potion, a strong one, the dogman said, closing his eyes against the pain. As master wishes, Creaker said, snapping his fingers, making the vial appear. Thanks, Creaker, that's all, Sirius said, picking up the vial, and downing it. The relief was instant. Are you coming down with something? Harry asked concerned. No, it's just stress. I'm still suffering from Azkaban. When I get too stressed out, my head hurts, Sirius explained. Have you seen anyone about it? Was the anxious reply. Yeah, Poppy said that if I practice my occlumency, then it'll get better. I have been, but with so many bad memories, it'll take a minute, Sirius said, giving the boy a reassuring grin. Get to reading. I'm fine, he added, pointing to the book. Harry huffed and opened the book and thumbed through it. It seemed dry and boring. He snapped it shut and put it on his lap. His face took on a mulish expression. He didn't want to read the stuff when he could be researching other things. Like spells, or curses. Something that would help him with Voldemort. "Why can't we practice dueling or something?" he asked, folding his arms across his chest. "I'll tell you what, you read that, and I'll teach you a few tricks. Be warned though, there'll be a test," Sirius stated. He wasn't going to let Harry slide on this. It was stuff he needed to know. "Oh, and what happens if I fail?" the teen asked smugly, thinking there wasn't anything Sirius could do to him. Forgetting the man was his magical guardian. "Besides me not teaching you, I could write to McGonagall and have her yank you from the team," the man answered mildly. "I could make you stay in your room until it is read," he added, ticking off things on his fingers. "I could send all your friends back home, so you don't have distractions," he held up the third finger. "There are lots of things I could do," he said, lowering his hand and shrugging. "Why would you do any of that?" Harry exclaimed, completely flabbergasted that anyone would go to such extremes to make him study. "I didn't say I would, I said I could," was the nonchalant answer. "You need to know this, Harry," he reiterated. "If you don't, the politicians will eat you alive. Not to mention, you could become broke, likely from scandals, and swindling." "Fine," Harry said, pouting. He took up the book and started reading it. "If you have any questions, let me know." "I'm going to be right here if you need me," Sirius said, taking up the stuff the kids wrote and started reading it. "Okay," Harry said, feeling a bit better that he wasn't alone in this. The two read for about 2 hours, then it was time for dance lessons. Harry still wasn't doing well, but he gave it his best shot. When they were done, Sirius took Harry to the basement and taught him a few spells that he could use to get out of a sticky situation. "These spells will help. Learn them as perfectly as you can. Having a few spells that you can do subconsciously will get you out of tight spots," Sirius said after Harry had learned them well enough. "I know what you mean," the boy said solemnly, thinking about how the disarming spell always leaped to his mind. And how well that spell had got him out of the graveyard. So, he took his godfather's word to heart and practiced the tripping jinx, the jelly-legged jinx, and a few others. They were first-year spells, but if done without incantation, they would buy him more time to either shoot off other spells, or get away if outnumbered, like he always seemed to be. "You did good," Sirius praised, clapping him on the back and leading him up the stairs. "Now, go to bed. It's been a long day." "All right, good night," the tired teen said, heading to his room. "Night." When Harry had disappeared, Sirius went to his study and read the notebook a bit more. He would hand it to Waters in the morning. Soon enough, he was tired enough to head to be himself. Everyone slept peacefully that night, all dreaming of what would happen when Sirius was free. Well, some of the teens were dreaming about teen things. The next morning 2 headlines blared across the pages of the Daily Prophet and the Witch Weekly. The first was on the Prophet. It read, "Sirius Black innocent of all charges." The second was in the Witch Weekly, "Friends of the Boy Who Lived Tell All, a eulogy to Cedric Diggory." Harry just knew there was going to be chaos today. They decided to start with the Daily Prophet. Everyone was more excited to see what Waters were doing to get Sirius off. They knew the gist, but they were hoping that the paper would tell them more. On the front page were 2 pictures, one of Sirius when he was in Hogwarts, and the other was when he escaped. The two contrasted each other, but it was quite a sight. If this worked, then Harry would never have to worry about going back to the Dursleys. He knew that Sirius wanted to adopt him into the family, and he was excited about that. However, it would be more legal if Sirius was free. Everyone gathered around to see what the article was saying. Those like Hermione were reading over Sirius's shoulder faster than anyone. Harry noticed that her face was one of happiness and excitement. So, he too started reading. Sirius, getting tired of everyone hanging over his shoulder, handed the paper to his cousin. "Read it out loud, Andy, please," Sirius said, grasping his coffee cup like it was a lifeline. She cleared her throat, and started to read. Sirius Black innocent of all charges. By Reggie Smartlock. In a surprising turn of events, it has come to this paper's attention that one Lord Sirius Orion Black might be innocent of all charges. Not that is matters, according to his legal representative, due to neglect of the law, Lord Black is a free man. There will be no trial, it was said. The trial should have been held in 81, remarks Harold Waters, Esquire. Mr. Waters explains further. This is in fact illegal. Everyone under the law, no matter what evidence, has the right to a trial, Mr. Waters stated. Even the most dangerous Death Eaters were tried. Crouch even gave his son a trial. If you recall, it is what lost him his bid for minister. After receiving a letter from Black's attorney, we did our own research and found that Lord Sirius Black was indeed never given a trial. It has now come to light that everything we thought we knew about this case has been a lie. Covered up and replaced by our own government. The fault lays with the previous ministry, and one Albus Dumbledore, who was then, and remained as such until recently, Chief Warlock. It was his duty to make sure that the law is maintained. Albus Dumbledore was not available for comment. Below the fold is the letter that was sent to us by Harold Waters, Esquire. In it he shows that there is undeniable proof that Lord Sirius Black was falsely imprisoned. As it follows, Lord Black will be suing the ministry for false imprisonment, and gross criminal misconduct. He feels that if those in charge at the time of his arrest had done their job, he would not have spent 12 years in Azkaban. Lord Black states in his statement, that he feels that Bartemius Crouch Sr. took one look at his family name and simply chucked him in a cell and forgot about him. How did this upstanding citizen slip through? He was once a decorated Auror. He also fought in the last war with you-know-who in Dumbledore's not-so-hidden vigilante group. How, or why, was this all brushed aside? Where were his superiors, and the headmaster when he needed them the most? We would all like answers to these questions. The former minister, Millicent Bagnold, was unavailable for comment. Bartemius Crouch Sr. passed away this last year. Rumor has it that his, at the time thought dead, son was kissed at the end of the Triwizard Tournament by orders of Minister Fudge, but this is unsubstantiated. As it stands, Lord Sirius Black is not a fugitive, as he was never a criminal. He cannot be given the kiss for escaping Azkaban, since he was never supposed to be there. Lord Black's lawyer, Harold Waters, Esquire, had this to say. When I filed this case, I was told that my client had to come in for a trial. I informed those in charge that no, he did not. As it stands, the only ones in the wrong here are the ministry. It is the law that no one can be held for more than 30 days without a trial. And even then, they must be put in a holding cell. Azkaban is for those that are found guilty in a court of law. My client was not. If that law is broken, then all charges are to be dropped, be that person innocent or not. I profess that my client is innocent. I have the proof to back it. Lord Black is a free man. If the ministry does not cease the kiss on sight order, I will bring the full wrath of my client down on them. As it stands, Lord Black will be suing the ministry for wrongful arrest and incarceration. If they do not back off, he will be suing them for attempted murder. That is all. There are talks that Harry Potter, and his friends, had informed Minister Fudge of Lord Black's innocence just a year ago, but they were rebuffed. As Lord Black is the boy's magical guardian, this might have some repercussions on the current minister. Minister Fudge was unavailable for comment. We at the Prophet can only hope that our government does the right thing. What followed was an outline of the events that happened on that fateful Halloween, and the days that followed. There was clear evidence that everything that happened was the truth. Included were pictures of Peter Pettigrew in both his forms. They were taken from memories that Sirius had given his attorney. They were not admissible in court, but they did show the public that the man was still alive. When Andy finished reading the article, emotions were running wild. "I'm happy for you, Sirius," Hermione said, hugging Harry for all she was worth. "Thanks, I'm still trying to digest this," Sirius said, taking a deep drink of his now lukewarm coffee. "What does the other one say?" Ginny asked, leaning over as if to hear better. "Shall I read it?" Andy said in a teasing voice. "Yes," was the unanimous reply. "So impatient," the older woman sniffed, then smiled, and read article. "Friends of the boy who lived tell all, a eulogy to Cedric Diggory." The story in the Witch Weekly was also emotional. The article was beautifully written and had many comments and testimonies from students and parents that did believe Harry. That he had faced you-know-who at the end of the tournament. There were also many letters posted about Harry's great deeds in all his years at Hogwarts. They waxed poetic on how time and time again he saved the school. There were mentions of the ridicule that he suffered from those that didn't believe him and how unjust they were. There were some interviewees that said that Harry was a good kid, nice boy, and the occasional really cute. All told, there were 35 statements that backed Harry. At the end was the eulogy. "My name is Harry Potter, and I was asked to tell a bit about myself and all that has happened to me since I came back to the wizarding world. Instead, however, I am going to tell you about a brave young man, whose end came too soon. Cedric Diggory was kind, a pure Hufflepuff. We were not friends, per se, but we were friendly. In the competition of the Triwizard Tournament, we learned a lot about each other. There were times we helped each other, and a tentative friendship was born. He was older than me and did try to support me when he could. It was hard for him to go against his house, but he did. He told me it was only fair that he stood up for what he believed was right. That his loyalty was to the truth. The Goblet of Fire chose him for a reason. As far as I am concerned, he was the Hogwarts champion. I was just there because someone, once again, tried to kill me. Cedric was fair, he was faithfully loyal to his school and was proud of his house, Hufflepuff. He taught me that there were kind people in this world, during a time when even all but one of my friends had turned their backs on me. Still, when I had helped him in the first task, he in turn helped me in the second. We didn't cheat, just nudged each other in the right direction. Turnabout, in this case, was fair play. During the third task both of us came across things that were dangerous and Cedric put his life on the line twice to help his fellow competitors. In the end, it was a tie. Just him and me. We both decided that we would take the cup together as a victory for Hogwarts. Neither of us were ready for what followed. We were kidnapped. I won't tell you who, because I have no proof, but we were transported to a graveyard with some unsavory wizards. Cedric was killed right away. He was given no chance to defend himself. "Kill the spare," are words that I will hear when I close my eyes for the rest of my life. It was right then that I knew this innocent young man was mowed down for being in the wrong place, at the wrong time. If I hadn't agreed to share the victory, Cedric would still be alive. I have to live with that pain the rest of my life. An event that happened during my ordeal brought the spirit of Cedric back for a short time. All he wanted was for me to bring his body back so that his parents would have closure. His final thoughts were for his parents. This loving son brought tears to my eyes. To love his parents so much that when he could have said anything, he thought of them. The thing that concerns me the most is how this has all been swept under the rug. That brave young man deserves to be remembered. He died, and no one is trying to find out why. It is a horrible state of affairs to see that bright light snuffed out and no one is willing to bring the murderer to justice. I can only hope that with this note that you will remember him and keep his memory alive. Don't let others tell you that he should be forgotten. Don't let other things cloud the issue. If the men who kidnapped us starts a war, he should be remembered as the first tragic casualty. Remember Cedric Diggory. I always will. There wasn't a dry eye in the room after that. Everyone took a moment to mourn the young man. Harry, Hermione started, but couldn't finish. She swallowed hard against the tears that were flowing down her face. She grabbed a napkin and tried futilely to wipe them away. Ginny did the same. They were both shooting sympathetic looks at the boy who had lived through that ordeal. Harry's head was hanging, his hair covering his face, as he fought the emotions that tried to take over. Ron put his hand on his friend's shoulder and gave it a squeeze. Harry gave him a weak smile and then straightened up. He glanced around the room and noted that everyone had been affected, even Ted. Sirius was looking like he was remembering the death of James. Harry tried to give the man comfort, but death was not easy to deal with. That was lovely, Harry, Andy said, wiping the tears off her face. She reached over and squeezed his hand, that was balled up as a fist. He deserved more, Harry said with a shaky voice. Well, Sirius started, clearing his throat. Well, I expect I will be getting a notice for an order meeting. So, how about we, Harry, go and do some studying until then, he asked, knowing his godson would want to be alone for a while. Yeah, sure, Harry agreed, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. And with that the two left the kitchen, breakfast forgotten. They made it to the study, but when Harry went to pick up the book, Sirius stopped him. Do you want to talk about it? The dogman asked, putting his hand on Harry's arm. I don't know, the boy confessed. I mean, every time I think I've gotten over it, I start crying again. I was all my fault was as far as he got before Sirius interrupted him. Harry, I know what survivor's guilt is. I suffered from it in my stay at Azkaban. To this day, it still troubles me. It took me a long time to realize that it was not my fault your parents died, yet I still can't shake the feeling that I should have done more. I know logically that I didn't shoot the spell that killed them. I understand that I didn't give up their location. As it was, I did everything in my power as they went into hiding to protect them. That protection was not enough. Subconsciously I know, it's not my fault, but there are still times the older man said, trailing off so he didn't get too far into his problems. He just wanted to help Harry through his. No, you don't Harry started, a bit of anger in his voice. Being at that age when he felt that no adult understood the plight of teenagers. But I do, Harry. I know exactly what you're going through, his godfather stated. He tilted Harry's head back up so he could look in his eyes. This was serious, and the boy needed to understand that he wasn't to blame. Listen to me, please. You were only trying to be fair, to share the victory with someone you felt deserved it. You didn't kill him. Voldemort took your shared joy away. Not you. Harry was still crying, and his head hung down again, however he was thinking hard. Tell me about this survivor's guilt, he requested softly. So the two talked for a long while, until a phoenix patroness entered the room. "Sirius, come to the burrow," the ghost-like phoenix said. "Domineering git," the dogman grumbled. "Yeah," the godson agreed. "Are you going to be okay?" his godfather asked him, squeezing his arm. "Yeah, this talk helped a bunch. I kinda wish we had it at the beginning of the summer." "Go. I'll be okay. I'll sit and study some more," Harry said, giving the man a watery smile. "If you're sure," Sirius said, standing up and pulling his godson into a hug. "Yeah, go," was the answer. They disengaged, and Harry picked up his book. His eyes were on the page, but his mind was not on the words. All the things Sirius had said made a lot of sense. He knew now, judging from his godfather's experience, that he would have these conflicting emotions for a while, but there was hope that one day he could overcome them. Sirius looked at him one more time and then left the room. He met Ron and Hermione right outside the door. "Let him think for an hour or so, then you can go see him. He's dealing with a lot of misplaced guilt," he said, turning them around so they headed in the opposite direction. "But," Hermione started, only to stop when Sirius held up his hand. "We just had an emotional talk, let him process," the dark-haired man said, guiding them into the kitchen. "Is Harry okay?" Ginny asked, looking at Sirius for the answer. "He'll be fine," the man said, grinning at all of them fondly. "I guess," Fred started. "We'll hunt him down," George continued. Later, they finished. "Right, just go easy on him. It's been a hard summer," Sirius said, going to the floor. "I'm off. I have a meeting." "Bye, Sirius," came the chorus of teen voices. "Try to behave," Andy said, as she stirred her tea. "Never," Sirius said with a wicked grin as he gathered the flo powder. He went through to the burrow and brushed off the ashes when he arrived. "Molly, Arthur," he said, nodding his head to each. "Sirius. How are the kids?" Arthur asked, squeezing Molly's shoulder when she went to open her mouth. It had taken all this time just to get her to understand she had been in the wrong. That didn't change her opinion of Sirius, but it did put it on the back burner. Molly now understood that the war was more important than her tiff with the man. For now, she'd keep quiet. "Good, good, Andy's with them now," Sirius answered, going towards the basement, then he stopped. He didn't remember where the basement was. He turned to Arthur, who was holding out a piece of parchment. He read the words, handed them back and then proceeded to the door at the far end of the room. "Ah, Sirius," Albus said as he entered. "I am glad you could join us," the man added, waving at everyone there. The room was darkish, there were no windows, only lit by many torches that lined the walls. The Weasleys did their best to make it homey. There was a large oval table, with many mismatched chairs. Food and drink were in the center, as always. There were pictures of landscapes hanging on the walls. There was an enormous rug under the table, that was a multitude of colors. Sirius sat next to Remus, who glared at him, causing the dogman to wrinkle his brow in confusion. Then he remembered why his friend might be upset. First his face went to horror, then he started chuckling a little, until Remus made his anger noticeable. "Sirius," the werewolf growled, a bit of yellow in his eyes. "Oh, shite, Moony. I'm sorry, I forgot to meet you. I was just so caught up with my freedom." "Please, forgive this old dog," Sirius pleaded, plastering his puppy dog eyes at his friend. "Sirius," Remus growled again, then shook his head, still glaring. "I sat at that park for over 3 hours. I tried to send you a message, but it went unanswered, he snarled. He wasn't really mad, but Sirius had to pay a bit for his forgetfulness. Honestly, with all that's going on with Harry and my attempts at freedom, let's not forget I'm still recovering from Azkaban, he tried to elicit sympathy. You left me in the dark, in a park, in the middle of the night, Remus said, not folding under the guilt card. He was too long a friend to fall for that. It might work on others, but never on a marauder. I am sorry, truly. You're right to be angry. In my defense, I really did forget, Sirius tried, once more to explain. He quickly reached inside his robe and pulled out the secret. Here, only you though. I don't want anyone else to know, he said, hurriedly as he thrust the parchment to the other man. Remus read the words and handed it back. Sirius felt it tug and gripped it tighter. You're not invited, Albus, he snapped at the old man. Come now, Sirius, you are being childish, Albus chastised, with that I know better than you look. Not open for debate, the now free man said, eating the parchment. Try getting it now, he smirked, only to be met by Albus' disappointed look. That man really needed to learn new stuff, the disappointed grandfather act was getting old. Why are we here? Did Riddle do something? Sirius asked instead. How do you know that name? The order leader asked. What? Tom Riddle? Harry told me. We do talk, you know. You're always going on and on about how we should call him by his name. So I am, Sirius answered as if it was obvious. So, did he do anything? He asked again, this time looking at Remus, who shrugged. Dumbledore sighed, and waved everyone to sit. No, Voldemort had been quiet. I believe he is trying to create an army of dark creatures before he makes himself known, the old man said, causing many to flinch at the name, but not in agreement. And what are we doing to stop him? Came the question from Sirius. He never felt they were doing anything productive. The only reason he had offered his house, or attended meetings, was because he wanted to keep his eye on things. This was the only group that did that. You may have brought up Voldemort's timeline, the headmaster stated, looking disappointed. How, was the question asked in a confused voice. By declaring yourself free, Voldemort might just break his followers out of Azkaban sooner than I had planned for, the old man explained. That doesn't make sense. What, in any realm of possibilities, does that have to do with me? I mean, why would my freedom make old Voldy jump ahead? Sirius questioned, along with many others. Confusion as predominate at the table, and order members whispered to each other. They, like Sirius, didn't understand what one had to do with the other. You will have to trust me that I know Tom better than the rest of you, came the vague answer. This declaration caused more murmuring. Sirius scoffed, and shook his head. Typical Albus, drop a bombshell and then don't explain. No, I went to school with Tom Riddle, Moody said, his magical eye zooming everywhere. Alas, I had forgotten, Albus conceded with a nod. Still, I have studied the man since his youth. I will only tell you that Sirius being declared a free man, might cause issues further down the line. You're still not making sense. I won't sit here and let you put blame on me for others' actions, Sirius stated, slamming his fist on the table. Remus reached over and laid a hand on his arm to try and calm him. That was not my intention at all, denied the headmaster. While I didn't make a case study of Riddle, for I didn't know he was the same man as Voldemort, I do remember him, Alastor said, rubbing his chin in thought. I know he left, and I had thought he moved elsewhere. He didn't look the same when he returned. and we will be discussing why you didn't tell me, Albus. He cut a glare towards his friend. If I remember correctly, he was a bad egg from the get-go. And I don't mean because he was Slytherin, the XRer stated, remembering the boy from many years ago. Wait, you knew his origins, one person asked, looking at Sirius. She, along with the rest of the Order, was confused as to why they were finding this out now. Like I said, Harry told me, Sirius said with a shrug, I don't know how long Albus knew. Moody just said he was only now learning that fact. Bad show, Albus, he said, shaking a finger at the old man. He then turned back to the group and grinned. I don't care who he used to be. The only thing I'm concerned about is old Voldy's Horcruxes. He dropped that bombshell. 6 people stood up on shock, chairs clattering to the floor behind them. Remus, Bill, Moody, Kingsley, Tonks and Snape. Horcruxes, they all shouted. As in more than one. Moody asked, his electric blue eye glued to Albus, whose face was shifting from rage to blank. You knew about this, he accused his old friend. All eyes turned to their leader. I did not want to burden you with this information, Dumbledore confessed, trying his disappointed look to Sirius. Don't blame me for you keeping secrets. How the hell are we supposed to take him down when he has anchored his soul? If we had known this, hell, if the Aurors knew this, we could have been trying to find them all this time. Instead you're guarding the DOM, which, by the way, is already protected. We are supposed to be fighting a war, not doing redundant babysitting, Sirius snapped at the man, refusing to be baited into being the bad guy. It is very important that Voldemort does not get what we are protecting, the old man stated. No, Moody disagreed with a cutting glare. It is far more important that we get rid of his anchors. Headmaster, tell us what you know. That way we can split in groups. One to find the Horcruxes, and another to safeguard the Department of Mysteries, Kingsley suggested, nodding to the others in the know. I do not wish to part with that information. It would be detrimental to the war if Voldemort were to find out we were hunting them, Albus said in his leader voice. You have to understand this is magic so dark that it is evil. The more people who know about it, the harder it will be for us to work in the shadows, he tried to explain. I count 7 people at this table who know what they are, argued Tonks, looking at all those who stood, and were now riding their chairs. Her hair was cycling through colors as she tried to get her emotions under control. Her faith in the headmaster was getting dimmer by the minute. Soon, she would outright distrust the man to look out for his members. You must understand that only one person can hunt these. Alas, he is not ready, the head of the order said, running his hand down his beard. Wait, so what? You're just going to let Harry face him, and hopefully not die in the process, and then hunt them down? Sirius demanded, not liking where this was going. He is the only one who can, came the answer that no one liked. Bullshit, Alastair said, spitting in a corner, making Molly glare at him. He ignored her. That is the biggest crock of shit that I've heard you spew in a long time, he said to his friend. I agree with Moody, I don't buy that, Sirius said, glaring at everyone, daring anyone to agree with the barmy old man. It is the truth, Dumbledore stated, not budging from his stance. No, it is your assumption, Moody disagreed, knowing more than anyone at this table how his friend worked. You will just have to trust me, Albus said, trying to give reassuring smiles to those looking at him for assurances. Leaving that off, because I'll be damned if I let it happen, so, my next question is, why the hell didn't you go after them when he was still a wraith in Albania? Sirius asked. Standing up and putting his fist on the table, leaning over to look the old man in the face. Albus just looked at him with his lips pursed. "You just told us that you have plans for my godson, but they stop now. He is my responsibility, and if you don't back the fuck off, I will pull him from Hogwarts and you will never see us again," Sirius threatened, his eyes piercing the other man's. "What do you mean, Albus, that you're going to let Harry face him?" Molly asked, looking back and forth between the two. "Harry is just a boy," she added, pleading with her eyes at Dumbledore to say that Sirius was wrong. "I have a feeling that what you are guarding at the DOM is a prophecy," Sirius said, finally looking away from the headmaster. "One that says that only Harry can beat Riddle," he sighed as he retook his chair. "That can't be right," came the desperate denial. "I don't know for sure, but it is the only thing I can think of," Sirius said, shrugging his shoulders. "Is this true?" someone asked. "I do not wish to divulge this knowledge, at this time. When the time is right, I will endeavor to make sure you have the information you need," Dumbledore said kindly, making many of those sitting there just nod in understanding. After all, if Albus said all was well, it must be, right? "Bill," Sirius called across the table, "will you come to my place so we can talk about how to get rid of Tom?" he asked, completely undermining Dumbledore. "I've had enough of this pussyfooting around answers. I could use your expertise." Bill looked first to his mom, then his dad, then the headmaster, then the rest who felt that they were being shafted. He nodded. "Yeah, okay," he said, not looking at his mother, who was gearing up to start yelling. "Anyone else?" Sirius asked, standing up and heading towards the stairs. Moody, Remus, Bill, Tonks and Kingsley all got up to join him. They too were tired of doing nothing productive. Snape had to stay behind, he was still barred from Grimmauld Place. Blasted mud. The rest of the order broke out in talking and some shouting. The 6 people leaving ignored them and made their way to the Fleur. To them it was a relief, they were finally going to fight back. As Sirius stood in front of the Weasleys' Fleur, he leaned over, one person at a time, and gave them the secret to his house, barring Tonks who already knew. Each person nodded to him and stepped into the Fleur. "Nymphadora first." "Mum," Tonks said as she brushed the ashes off. She went to hug her mother. The Fleur flared again, making Andy jump a bit, especially when Moody came out. Then flared more, letting the rest through. "Nymphadora, I didn't expect you back so soon and with company." "Sirius, I thought you were keeping the house hidden from the order," Andy said, composing herself, and releasing the hug. She looked at Sirius with a quirked eyebrow. "Things got a bit out of hand," he said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yes, they tend to do that around you," she replied, then looked at the rest of the group. "Albus is being his usual self and not telling anyone anything," the dark-haired man explained, huffing as he sat at the table. "You know how he is. So, I kinda let them all know what we know." Then he tried to quash it, "So I asked these guys if they wanted to help," Padfoot defended himself as he waved to the rest, who were settling at the table. "I don't know how such a pacifist could try and lead a group of vigilantes. Don't get me wrong, Albus is a good friend. But his don't kill orders are annoying. Still, he was the only one trying to do anything," Moody said, thumping down in a chair, letting his wooden legs slide forward. "Andy," he greeted with a nod. "Alastair, it's been a while," Mrs. Tonks said, with a return nod in her old friend's direction. While they hadn't been in school together, they did know each other from mutual friends. It had been a very long time since she had seen him. "Good to see you too," Alastair said, taking a seat as he looked around the very tidy room. "Like what you did with the place," he said, glancing at the many house elves standing around waiting for orders. He never really trusted house elves. The ones he knew worked loopholes like pros. He respected them for it, but it made him trust them a lot less. If house elves could be sorted, most would go into Slytherin. "Yes, it is homier now," Remus agreed, taking a seat next to Moody. "I got some new house elves," Sirius said with a deep sigh. He hadn't intended to hijack people from the order, but Albus brush off was grating. "Dinky, some tea, please," he called out as he sat at the head of the table. A few seconds later biscuits, rolls, some triangle sandwiches and tea appeared. Many of the occupants reached for something and then settled back. "So, to repeat your earlier question," Bill said, snagging a biscuit from the center of the table, "why are we here?" "Hold on a moment, Bill," Sirius said, holding up his hand and turning to his cousin. "Andy, can you keep the kids upstairs? As much as I hate to keep things from them, this needs to be discussed first," he asked, taking the teacup Dinky had just brought him. "Make sure the twins don't use their extendable ears, please. As much as I love their inventions, this needs to stay in this room. We'll suss out what to tell them later." "Is it dangerous?" she asked, looking around like evil was going to pop up any second. Her hand straying to her wand. "Not at the moment," he answered with a shrug. "However, it can get that way if the wrong people know about it," he finished, once again shrugging. Then he cringed a bit when Andy gave him a look. Her pure-blood upbringing made her want to chastise him. Purebloods don't shrug. He just smirked at her, while Tonks giggled. It was a bad habit he picked up in school. Something that made his mother furious. She hated his causal ways and did her very best to beat it out of him. That was one of the reasons he ran away. "I'll do my best," she said with a sniff, glaring at her rebellious daughter, who just smirked back. Tonks took after her dad, who only had the minimal manners needed for a lawyer, which were high in the courtroom, or boardroom, but when at home, he was more of a couch potato. It had infuriated her at first, but after years of marriage, she just went with it. Still, her upbringing did make her want to jinx those that knew better. "That's all I can ask with that bunch," Sirius chuckled, and gave her a wink. He knew she could keep the twins in line. She had Bellatrix as a sister, and from what he heard, before she ran off and married Ted, Andy was the one in charge. Sometimes he wondered if Bella went mad because Andy left. Something he'd probably never know. "You'll keep me, and Ted, informed?" she asked, looking back as she came to the doorway. "Yeah, just let us think up a plan," he answered, relaxing a bit more now that he was doing something. "Very well then. Nymphadora, come find me when this meeting is over," she said as she opened the door and went through. She locked and warded the door and went to find the teens. She had a few ideas on how to keep them occupied. Like maybe teaching them a few new spells for everyday things. After they felt the wards go up, everyone relaxed a bit. "Okay, so we know Voldy has Horcruxes," Bill started, leaning back in his chair. "Do we know what any of them are?" "I have one, possibly two," Sirius confessed, and called Kriaker. "Kriaker," he said when the elf popped in, "get the iron box out of the safe, please." The elf popped away, and reappeared in a matter of seconds, box in hand. "Does Master need Kriaker to open the box?" Kriaker asked, holding the box out for Sirius to take. "No, I spelled it to only open for me," Sirius said, taking the box and putting it on the table. "Thanks, Kriaker, you can go." The elf bowed and left. Creaker brought this to me. Regulus, my brother, stole it from Tom. It was his last act, defying Voldy, the man explained, bitterness tinging his voice. So much time lost with his brother. He sighed and put those thoughts away for now. Open it up. Let's see what it is, Kingsley said, leaning forward to get a good look at what old Tom might have used to make his Horcrux. Sirius waved his wand over the box and it snapped open. Evil permeated the air, and everyone leaned back. They could almost taste the vileness that came from the necklace. It made the air rank. Many screwed up their noses and held their hands over their mouths. Sirius wondered why the evil was more predominant than it had been, but brushed it off as it being locked up for a while. Maybe it was a bit sentient and was trying to escape all this time. Who knew? It was part of a soul after all. Isn't that Slytherin's locket? Moody asked, examining it with his magical eye. The oppressiveness wore down, and everyone could breathe again. I know Tom said he was the heir, but I didn't know he found anything belonging to the man, he finished, still looking over the evil thing. I don't know, probably, Sirius answered, pushing the box in the middle of the table. Bill stood up and came around the table and peered inside. He waved his wand in an extraordinarily complex manner and said, Socios inveniat. When he finished, 6 beams of dark blue light flew from the necklace. Shite, he said, waving his wand again. This time a piece of parchment popped up with a quill and inkpot. The quill started writing for a few seconds, then disappeared along with the inkpot. He snatched the parchment and started reading. Well, what does it say? Moody asked, knowing just what Bill had done. There's 5 more. One in this house, he said, looking at Sirius. The 6th light was for Tom, himself. Harry, the man said, sadness laced his voice. I brought you here, not only to take out Voldy, but I need to save Harry, his tone was desperate. He knew if anyone could save his godson, these people would, or at least point him in the right direction. Bill smiled, placed a hand on Sirius' shoulder. We will, he said firmly. You know how? The dogman perked up immediately. Of course. My time in Egypt taught me many things. One, is that these vile pieces of dung are pretty much worthless. Sure, they keep you tied to this plane, but they are easily dispelled. That, and if left alone they will only live a normal lifespan. The soul is finite, it has an expiration date. The people who wrote the books on how to make one, were lying. They don't make you live forever. You're just harder to kill during your lifespan. Oh, well, I guess that explains why Herpo the Foul isn't around anymore, Tonks said, tapping her chin in thought. Exactly, Bill said triumphantly. Now the one in Harry will be tricky. We'll have to go to Gringotts to get it out, but it can be done, the redhead explained, taking the seat next to Sirius. Where are the others, lad? Moody asked again, putting aside the notion that Potter was connected to Riddle. He'd have to keep an eye on the teen, not out of mistrust, but to make sure the evil doesn't take over. Let's see, one is in a town called Little Hangleton. I've never heard of it, so it must be a Muggle town. Good thing the coordinates are here, we can check it out when we're done here. Besides being warded by Riddle, it should be the easiest, he read off, squinting at the paper like the words were small. The others looked at each other and nodded. That sounds like a plan, Tonks said, smiling at Bill. She was overwhelmingly happy that finally progress was being made to end this war. She, like the rest here, had been frustrated at the lack of action in the Order. Dumbledore, for all his greatness, was not a fighter. Sure, He had some tricks up his sleeve that she would probably never match, but he believed that all life was sacred and should not be taken. She didn't subscribe to that. There are two in Wiltshire, I think one is Tom. Its power signature is higher than the rest. They are together, so it might not be as easy. I wish this spell told me what the items were, the curse breaker grumbled. The next one, I'm going to have to speak to the goblins about. It's in London's Gringotts, he sighed heavily, hoping that the goblins would help. They were very much for staying out of wizarding conflicts, but they could be bought. It would just take a lot. Perhaps, he could get Sirius to part with all the goblin-made silver scattered about the place. Then again, goblins took issue with soul magic. When they took Harry in, he'd talk to Ragnok. If anyone could get this item, it would be him. And the last? Kingsley asked, putting his biscuit down he had been holding. The evil in the air made him lose his appetite. Hogwarts, was the answer. But the wards are preventing me from pinpointing it. Like the one in Gringotts. I know it's there, but not which part of the castle. Is there a spell that will tell us when we are getting close? If we can teach the kids, they might be able to look for it this coming school year, Sirius asked, thinking up plans to get what they needed. Yeah, I'll teach the twins. They're of age, the oldest Weasley said, still glaring at the parchment like it was keeping secrets from him. Great, we have the directions, Kingsley said, leaning forward again to get a good feel of the necklace. I vote Bill, Remus, and Moody do the treasure hunting in Little Hangleton, while Tonks and I do some recon at Wiltshire. Malfoy lives there, and rumor has it so does Tom. I don't want to pop up in that living room, he added, taking out his wand and waving it over the necklace, doing the same spell as Bill. Do we want to get rid of them all at the same time, so that Tom doesn't realize that we're trying to kill him? Tonks asked, taking the parchment from Kingsley and memorizing it. That's a good idea, Tonks, Sirius said, taking Bill's parchment and glancing over it. There's no telling if he could feel their deaths or not. So, I'll find some more boxes, and we can keep them in my safe. Hey, Bill, how will they get it out of Harry? Well, I can't tell you that. It's a goblin secret. Only their most trusted shaman knows, he answered, closing the box and making the last feelings of evil dissipate. Right, so we have a plan, Moody said gruffly, standing and taking the parchment from Tonks. Let's put it into action. With that the adults, bar Sirius, who wanted to put the necklace away and talk to the kids, left via the front porch. Sirius really hoped that it was all as simple as Bill said. He really hated that Albus didn't do this ages ago. His godson was in danger, and that man didn't even ask a curse breaker if he could help. Maybe, Albus was going senile. Sirius knew he was not an expert in dispelling curses like the rest. It had been years since he was an Auror, so he'd let them handle it. Still, now that he thought about it, he might want to brush up on fighting, maybe teach the kids a thing or two. With that in mind, he headed up the stairs. When he reached the top, he listened to where everyone was. He heard chuckling and headed towards the twins' room, which was the biggest, bar the master suite. Opening the door, he saw that everyone was sitting on any available floor space and they were laughing and playing a card game that seemed to be Muggle. Suddenly Fred called out, "Bullshit!" and slammed a card down. Harry groaned, and picked up the large pile in the middle. "You need a better poker face, Harrykins," Fred said, cackling madly. "Yeah, I'll get right on that," the boy who lived grumbled. Andy had to fight hard not to reprimand him. The first time was slightly embarrassing. They explained the rules, and she settled down to watch. Teens will be teens, after all. Language, Sirius said half-heartedly. Don't worry, Sirius, it's part of the game, Hermione said with a wrinkled nose. She wasn't playing, card games never appealed to her. I don't know where Harry learned it from, but everyone else seems to be enjoying it. Dudley, came the succinct answer. Okay, the dogman said slowly, he thought Harry didn't get on with his cousin. Anyway, put the cards up for now. I have something I need to talk to you all about. Sirius, are you sure you should be telling the Weasley children? They are not your charges, Andy said with a good deal of worry as she smoothed down her trousers in nervous habit. Even if I don't, Harry and his friends will just tell them anyway, he replied with a shrug. He would just have to word it all to be friendly. Let them know that there is a danger, but not tell them the whole of it. The adults were already working on stopping most of it anyway. If worded carefully, then they would at least know to be careful. He explained that to Andy, but she still pursed her lips. That's not true, Hermione denied. Well, it is on my part, Harry rebutted. And I'll thank you for not putting words in my mouth, he snapped. Hermione opened and closed her mouth a few times, but seeing Harry's glare, she backed off for the moment. Changing one's attitude was not easy, but she really wanted to maintain her friendship with Harry and Ron. Still, there was probably a good reason that some secrets should remain secret. How about this? Hermione, Ginny, and Ron, you leave the room. Go do your homework, or something. That way if Harry or the twins feel you need to know, they can tell you, Sirius suggested, rocking back on his heels. He wanted to chastise Hermione, but it wasn't his place. Still, she was working hard on curbing her pushy ways, so he had to give her credit. Fine, she huffed and left the room. If it was important, then Harry would tell her. Or at least tell her that he couldn't tell her. Either way, she would do her best to help in any way she could. Do I have to? Whinged Ron as he stood undecided. He knew that Harry would tell him. Hopefully. So why did he have to leave? He glanced at his best mate, who shrugged and nodded his head. Ron's shoulders slumped and he knew that this was an argument he would not win. I think it's for the best, Andy said, taking his and Ginny's arm and leading them away. Ginny protesting quite loudly, while Ron dragged his heels. You two are minors, so it is not up to Sirius to go against your mum. The twins, however, are adults. They can decide for themselves, they heard her say before the door closed. Don't worry, Harrykins, Fred said, grinning like a loon. Fred and I know how, George said with a matching grin. To protect our minds, they said together. We learned from the best, Fred stated, digging in his pocket. Yeah, the Marauders were very insistent about that, George said, snatching the book that his brother produced. Said it was the only way they got away with their pranks, Fred added with a wink. Like we said, the best, George agreed. This little gem will teach you all you need to know, Fred added, taking the book back. We'd have given it to you sooner, but you're not really a prankster, George said, winking to his friend. What book is that? Sirius asked, squinting his eyes to see the title of the book. He had his suspicions, but he wanted to hear them say it. Harry had told him last year that the twins had given his godson the Marauders map, so he knew they had heard of his little group, but how did they find that book? This, Fred said, holding up a small green book. Found it after we got the map to work, George said, with a mischievous smile. Merlin, I haven't seen this since 6th year, Sirius said, summoning the book to his hands. We wrote this and tucked it away in the library, he mused, thumbing through the pages. It was spelled so that only future pranksters could find it and learn how to hide, he added, looking for something in particular. You wrote this? Fred and George asked, standing and stepping forward. Yeah, me, Remus, James and the traitor, the dogman said distractedly, finding what he was looking for. Here, Harry, read up on this. It'll tell you how to keep people out of your mind. This was one of Mooney's contributions. Basically, he tells how to set your mind up like a werewolf's, making it dangerous for anyone to take a peek, he explained, grinning evilly. It works too, Fred said, still looking at pet food. First time Snape tried after we got it, he was in the hospital wing for the rest of the day, George said, he too was still looking at one of their idols. Not even Dumbledore can break this method, Sirius agreed, still looking like he ate the canary. Harry, who had been bouncing his head back and forth between the three, took the book and skimmed the page. It didn't look hard, but he could tell it might take a bit of meditation. Something he was very good at. Being locked in a cupboard for his childhood had taught him how to go into his mind for peace and calmness. But he was out of practice, because Hogwarts had him running for his life every year, no time to relax, but judging from what he was reading, it should take a week. Thinking about that, he might want to practice meditating every night. It might make Hogwarts easier. All those life-threatening situations might be easier to handle if he could think clearly. Now that he thought about it, it was strange that he never did that at school. Something he was going to have to look into that later. Thanks, he said to all three. I am going to share this with the others. Maybe then we can tell them more, he said, still reading. That is if what you have to tell it us that classified, that is. Right, let's discuss that, Sirius said, then rubbed his chin. What to tell you first, he muttered mostly to himself. Harry, there's really no nice way to put this, but there's some dark magic in your scar. I talked to Bill and he said he can remove it, he added quickly, making calming motions at his godson's horrified face. That's a relief, Harry sighed, slipping down his chair a bit. Does this mean I won't be seeing Tom in my dreams? He asked hopefully. He hated those visions. Well, I can't say you won't have nightmares, but any connection you have to the dark idiot should disappear, his godfather stated, making Harry slip down his chair further. Like the world had been lifted off his shoulders. Still, practice this occlumency and that'll stop anyway. Right, okay. Anything else? He asked, sitting up again. Well, there's one thing, but I warn you, this is only conjecture, but there might be a prophecy, Sirius said, watching the teen for his reaction. Now, I don't place much faith in prophecies, but it seems that Tom and Albus are banking on what it says to see who wins the war. Well, that's just fucking dandy, Harry snarled, gripping the book tight, and looking at the carpet like it had wronged him. It did make sense though, why Dumbledore and Riddle were so fixated on him. He didn't have to like for it to be true. Language, Fred said lightly, trying to lift the mood, finally looking away from who he was sure was pet food. Yeah, mind your speech, George added jokingly, clapping a hand on Harry's shoulder. Sod off, the dark-haired teen replied, but he did smile. Fred and George had bigger potty mouths than he ever will. Comes from being repressed all their childhood. Fret not, Harry. Doesn't Trelawney predict your death every day? Fred said, standing up and moving closer to Harry so they could boost his spirits. And look, you're still here, George added, waving his hand up and down to indicate that Harry was alive. Yeah, she does. However, my third year she gave a prophecy that Scabbers/Wormtail/Peter would disappear and go find Tom. That came true just like she said. So, I must believe that there are real prophecies, Harry said, putting his head in his hands. While that is true, I have a bit of a theory, Sirius said, scooting off the desk and crouching down in front of the distraught teen. What? Harry asked, picking his head up and looking at his godfather. You see, prophecies are tricky things, the older man said, peering into his godson's eyes. They really did look like lilies. The more you try to thwart them, the more fate decides that they need to come to pass. That doesn't make me feel better, Padfoot, Harry said, glaring at the man who was failing to make him feel better. No, see, what I'm trying to say is if you leave them alone, prophecies, they just sit there, he said, once more trying to calm Harry. That doesn't make sense, we didn't try and stop that last one, and Peter still got away, Harry said, wrinkling his brow as if trying to piece it together. Yeah, but we actually did try and keep him from running off. I'm sure that on a subconscious level you knew it was about the rat. So therefore, you tried to stop it, Sirius tried to explain. Maybe, came the doubtful reply. Look, there are thousands upon thousands of prophecies in the DOM that have never come to pass. They are all just sitting there in the room that the unspeakable set up. They keep them around to study them, but only the person who heard the prophecy, or who it's about, can pick up the globe, the older man tried again. So, in this case, only you or Riddle can hear the prophecy, if it is about you. Though, I'm sure Albus is the one who heard it, but he would not need to hear it again. So only me or Tom can get it, the wary teen asked, wondering if he should go and take the damn thing. Yeah. Which is one of the reasons I told Dumbledore that guarding it was futile. I mean only you, Tom, and probably Albus, can get it. And I can tell you now that besides a very few members, no one in the order can stand up to Tom, Sirius said, with a sniff. Me being one of them, he added hauntingly. The three teens snorted. How do you know this? Fred asked, tilting his head in confusion. Oh, well, my great-grandfather, Sirius II, was an unspeakable. He broke his vows with some pretty dark magic, and he wrote all about what they get up to down there. Well, during his time anyway, Sirius explained, his eyes glazed a bit in remembrance of reading that diary. What do they do down there? Fred and George asked, leaning around Harry to peer at Sirius. Loads of stuff, Sirius answered, then waved it off. I'll get you the diary if you want. I'll have to copy it, the original is cursed. Anyway, Harry, what I'm trying to say is, don't let this rule your life. Acknowledge it and move on. Yeah, okay, I'll try, Harry said, sitting up straighter and putting the forgotten book in his back pocket. It was small enough to just barely fit. Do I need to return this book? He asked the other three. Nah, the twins said, we have it memorized. I helped write it, I already know what it says, Sirius said with a shrug. However, when you've got it memorized, I'd like it if you put it back in the library. It's written for future pranksters. If you're worried about giving up something that belongs to you, Dad, I have a few things that I can give you, he offered, thinking of the communication mirrors. Thanks, guys, Harry said, grinning at all of them. I'll think about putting it in the library. If we can make a permanent copy, that'd be great. Sound like a plan. Let me brush up on my runes and transfiguration, his godfather replied. Anyway, I'm going to do some training and you guys, along with the other kids, are more than welcome to join me, the older man said, clapping Harry's shoulder and standing up. "I'm in," all three of them said, then chuckled at each other. "You can decide what you tell people," Sirius said, sitting back on the desk. "But I hope you understand that most of this can't get out. So, choose carefully what you tell anyone, friends or not. I think, and I hope the twins agree, that we should only say that there's a bit of a curse in my scar, and that Bill's going to remove it. I would feel better if the prophecy theory didn't get out," Harry stated, looking to his two friends. "When I'm done with this book, I'll teach them. It's better that they can protect their minds, regardless." "Sounds like a good plan. Why don't you stay here, read that book? If you need help, come find me," Sirius said, getting off the desk and moving towards the door. The twins quickly got up and followed him. He just knew they were going to pester him for tips, stories, and such. "Practice starts at 7. After dinner, so don't eat overly much," he said to Harry, who waved that he heard, and then left, hoping to dodge the twins until Moony got back, then he could foist them off on him. On the other hand, maybe he should let them follow him to the den. He needed to take his mind off what the others were doing. Harry went back to his room and studied the book for hours. He had heard many people try to call for him, but they all soon gave up when he didn't answer. Regulus' room was great, only he and Sirius could enter it. Well, and the house elves, but the others could not. They could come to visit with him in the lead, but if he wasn't with them, then they didn't even know where it was. Sirius had set it up the first day he was here. After he had talked to Ron and Hermione, he told Sirius that he wanted a place to hide. So, after Sirius had taken care of Buckbeak, he charmed the room. Harry was grateful for that bit of spell work. The book on occlumency was amazing. The part he was reading was very comprehensive. Thanks to Mooney's personal insight on how his own mind was protected. The basic principle was that you envisioned an animal, like the werewolf, in your head. The creature would roam your mind in miniature, then if someone breached your mind it would expand to its normal size, imposing itself larger than life. Nothing but teeth and anger. You can have a whole pack in there, wandering around. The main job was to train them to hurt or destroy anything that entered. That was the hard part. Harry wasn't sure if that hurt the person in real life, but if it kept Snape and Dumbledore out of his head, he could live with them being scarred. The book said that it was easier if you had an animagus form, but if not, then any dangerous animal you were familiar with would work. Harry, who was a sadistic little prick when it came to protecting what was his, decided that the alien, from the movie Alien, would work. The only reason he knew the movie was because he had snuck into hallway, out of sight from the living room, to sneak peeks at it. He had to scurry back to his cupboard many times when Aunt Petunia got up to get her men their many snacks, but he still got to see the creature. He had been fascinated with it since. He knew loads of movies by doing this. His relatives thought he was so cowed that they never even realized he was just plain sneaking. Stupid fools. The Hat wanted to put him in Slytherin for a reason. After he would get these sneak peeks, he would then go to the library and try to look up the book from of any movie that caught his interest. There were tons of them, and most of the time they were better than the movie. He had a lot of things he could add, Bigfoot, Freddy Krueger, Cujo, to name a few, but he stuck with the alien for now. He could just imagine what people would think if he put the whole of that American author, Stephen King, in his head. He did a full-body shudder from that thought, perhaps not. Settling on what he wanted, he sat on the bed and started to picture it in his mind. It took the better part of an hour, but soon there were a swarm of aliens roaming around his head. Hissing, snarling, and sniffing around. They were transparent at the moment, but, according to what Mooney wrote, with practice they would become more lifelike. The book also said that you had to picture your mind, memories, and things you didn't want people to know, in some sort of structure. Either a house, a dome, a cave system, or building of some sort. Harry thought that his cupboard was a great place. It's so unassuming that anyone who didn't know his childhood, would never even glance at it. So, he put everything precious thoughts and memories in there, and let all the bad stuff hang around number 4 Privet Dr. If the alien didn't keep them out, meeting his relatives might. Vernon was scary enough when he got to yelling. Even Snape didn't reach his uncle's shade of purple. Sometimes, it looked like Vernon was an alien too. Only more like Jabba the Hutt, or something. He wasn't sure which was worst. He hadn't quite gotten it all set up when he heard a knock on the door. "Yeah," he called, stretching and cracking his back from sitting so long. "Harry, come on, it's time for dinner," Sirius said, opening the door. "Have you been at this the whole time?" "Harry, you don't need to get it right in one go," he said, joining Harry on the bed. "I know, but I've almost got it set up," Harry said, stretching his legs, which had gone to sleep from sitting cross-legged for so long. "You should see what I've got going on in there." "Not yet, I've not set it up all the way." "But I will, you just watch." "You've got time. It's still weeks before you head back to Hogwarts," his godfather said, patting one of his legs. "I was thinking about that," Harry hedged, swinging his legs to the side of the bed and folding his hands between his knees. "I don't know if I want to go back," he confessed, peeking to the side through his bangs. "What do you mean?" Sirius asked, worried that Harry might have finally had enough. Not that he was against it, just the opposite. He'd do anything to spend more time with his godson. "Well, every year something happens to me," Harry said, almost in a whisper, like Sirius might not believe him. "Usually I face something, every professor, Mooney included, had tried to do me in. If Ron's right, then the Ministry is doing it this time. I don't want to go a whole year looking over my shoulder. If my luck holds true, it'll be the new professor will be the culprit," the tired boy said, laying back on his bed and staring at the canopy top. "My luck sucks," he sighed, putting his arm over his eyes. "I get that. Both Mooney and Moody have told me about your run-ins with the past professors, and I'm still mad at Albus for letting all that shite happen. But I have to know, are you sure?" "What about your friends?" the dogman asked, grabbing Harry's arm and pulling him up so they could see one another. "As much as I love my friends, they might be safer without me. I mean, they don't get into trouble on their own. It's usually them following me around that gets them hurt," the poor teen sighed, leaning his head on his godfather's shoulder. Sirius jerked up his shoulder, making Harry sit up straight so he could read his face. "From what you and the others have told me about all your near-death experiences, I have to confess I was thinking along the same line. You not returning, I mean. However, you have to be really sure this is what you want. If it is, you have my full support. Heck, I'll hire tutors. Don't worry about your owls, we can get you passing those with straight O's. I know Remus and Bill would help. Maybe even the rest of the group I brought back. But, Harry, you have to be sure," he said, looking into the boy's eyes. All he saw there was exhaustion. "I'm 85% sure this is what I want," Harry said with conviction. "Albus won't like it," came the necessary warning. "He can bugger off. You're my guardian," was the reply. "Okay, think about it for a few days. Talk to your friends," Sirius suggested, giving him a one-armed hug. "I'll support you," no matter what you decide? Yeah, okay. I guess I should get more opinions, Harry said with a sigh. Then he stood up and started walking out the room. Dinner, he asked as Sirius joined him. Dinner, the other man confirmed. And the two went downstairs to join the rest of the house. The group of treasure hunters hadn't returned yet and Sirius was getting worried. He tried to hide it from the kids, but they could tell something was up. They kept shooting looks at him. He would just smile at them and then share a concerned look with Andy and Ted. They too were worried about their daughter, but they didn't want the kids to know. There was no need to let them know, right yet. It would be better if they were told that it was all over, and they no longer had to worry about the dark idiot. That's what they were shooting for anyway. Harry, Ron asked between bites. Can you tell us what you guys talked about? Really, Ronald, at the dinner table? Andy scolded, snapping more than she usually would. She would probably be tightly wound until Nymphadora came back. Now, Andy, Ted said with a chuckle, keeping the mood light. It's normal to be curious, he finished, patting her hand. He can wait. There will be no discussion on the war, or anything related to it, at the dinner table, she snapped, glaring at her husband. You heard the lady, keep those questions until dinner is done, Sirius said, smiling at his cousin. She harumphed and went back to pushing food around her plate. The conversation turned to Hogwarts, and Harry declined to make comment. The main question for everyone there was who was going to be the Dada professor. No one really knew and the letters hadn't come yet. So that topic petered out and talks turned to Quidditch. It was just as Creaker served afters that Bill, Remus, and Moody came through the floor. They looked like they had seen battle, with torn and burnt clothes and ashes and dirt everywhere. Oh, Merlin, what happened? Andy asked, getting up, pulling her wand, and waving it at the trio. The kids all scrambled to help, but they were shooed away by Andy. They all stood by the doors and watched as she waved her wand over the tired men. They were itching to ask questions but knew from prior experience that those would go unanswered. Even Moody was too tired to stop her, and he hated anyone pointing their wand at him. They shuffled to empty chairs and collapsed. That was one well-warded shack, Bill said, glancing at the kids. Did you get it? Sirius wanted to know as he poured some fire whiskey for them. Sirius, wait until I'm done. They may need potions, Andy scolded, waving her wand over Bill, who seemed the worse for wear. Fine, but they're there when you need them, the dogman said, putting the glasses in the middle of the table. So, did you get it? He asked again. Moody reached over and snagged a glass, waved his wand over it, and then chugged it down. We got it? Gives us a mo, and we'll take it to your safe, he said after blowing flames from his mouth. That did the trick. The kids looked at each other, and as one, they turned and left the room. They knew the adults wouldn't talk to them. They were almost to the stairs when Hermione stopped and held Harry back. You guys go on, she said to the others, grabbing Harry's elbow. I want to talk to Harry, she finished, dragging the unresisting boy to the library. Harry sighed in resignation and followed along. Tell me what Sirius told you, she all but demanded the minute the door closed. No, was the curt answer. But, Harry, I need to know so I can tell you what to tell others, she said, stomping her foot. No, you can hear what I'm going to tell everyone, Harry said, folding his arms and glaring at her. I don't like my friends demanding things from me. I thought we talked about you trying to be my mom. My mom is dead, and you are not her ghost. But no, that's final, he said, turning and walking from the room. He knew that the information he was going to share had to be minimal, and that anything that got out had to be stuff that he didn't care if Dumbledore knew. And what he said was true. While he loved Hermione to death, she could be quite pushy when she wanted information. She was just going to have to learn to take no for an answer. He was in charge of what he told anyone, not her. He was glad he had sussed it out with the twins and Sirius beforehand. He went up the stairs and joined the others in the twins' room. They were chatting about Hogwarts and who the Dada teacher would be when entered, and he sat down on one of the beds. Leaning against the wall and tilting his head back to look at the ceiling like it had the answers. Hermione came slinking in a few minutes later. It looked like she had been slapped with a fish, and she was thinking hard on what that meant. It wasn't often that anyone denied her information. Especially not those her age. Harry had always told her what was going on in his life, and she was confused as to why he would hold back now. Was that she was pushy? Or did he know something that might hurt her if she found out? She didn't know, and there was no way to find out, and it was frustrating her. "Can you tell us now?" Ron asked, looking at the three in the know. "I mean, if you can. I know that there are some things that you guys might not be able to tell us." Sirius did mention that there was harmful stuff in what he told you guys. "But I'd really like to help if I can," he added, hoping that Harry wasn't in trouble again, but he'd be there if his best mate needed him. He knew Hermione would be too, even if they didn't have all the information. Harry took a deep sigh and sat up straight. He looked at his friends and smiled. He knew that even if they weren't on the same page, he could count on everyone in this room. "All I can tell you is that there's some dark magic in my scar, and Bill is taking me to the goblins to get it removed," he answered as vaguely as he could, while sounding like he was giving a secret. "They didn't tell you what kind of magic?" Hermione asked, leaning forward to make sure she heard every word. Her hands twitched like she was dying to go and find out what could solve the problem. "No, just that it's in my scar," the dark-haired teen answered with a shrug. Come to think about it, Sirius didn't mention what it was. Harry wasn't sure if he wanted to know. As long as it was removed, he really didn't care. "Why didn't Dumbledore know?" she inquired instead, biting her lip in confusion. "Bugger me if I know," Harry said with a bit of a scowl. "I'll bet he did," said Ron, thinking hard on all he knew about the headmaster. "I mean, how could he not? He's always going on about Harry having to be some sort of champion." "Yeah, he knew," the redhead finished, tapping his chin. "I'll bet you're right," Harry sighed, then thought a moment. "Which is why I'm thinking of dropping out of school," he said, taking in everyone's reaction. "Well, one of the reasons." "Harry, you can't." Hermione started, only stopped when Harry held up his hand. "And you can tell what I can and can't do, why?" he asked with a lifting of his eyebrow. He wasn't being mean, but really, sometimes that girl. "Oh, well, what I meant was, well, that you really shouldn't," she stuttered out. "Education is really important, and you need your owls to get a job." "I know that, Hermione," he snapped at her. "I am not stupid, you know. Don't you think I talked this out with my godfather?" he asked with a bit of scorn, then sighed. She was only trying to help. "Sorry, it's been a bad day." "Well, not totally bad, but with this news that there's something in my scar. I'm just a bit short-tempered." "I'm sorry, I'm doing it again, aren't I?" "I didn't mean to sound bossy, I'm just worried," she finished, reaching over and squeezing his hand. "I know it must be difficult, but Harry, are you sure?" "Hermione, I know you worry, but still," he left it hanging. "Anyway, Like I told Sirius, I'm 85% sure that this is what I need to do. He told me to discuss it with you guys, but unless you give me a really good reason, he trailed off again. I think you have the right idea, Ron said, thinking that maybe for once his friend might have a good school year, even if he wasn't at Hogwarts. Merlin knows, Harry never had one before. Every year Harry was there, was a bloody nightmare. What about Quidditch? Ginny asked, thinking hard on what Hogwarts would be like without Harry. She wasn't sure she liked that picture, but if it made Harry happy, then she'd support him. But she wanted to make sure he really wanted that. And the rest of us, she continued, pointing her fingers at the youngest in the room. I was thinking on dropping that anyway, because like Hogwarts teachers, Quidditch seems to want to do me in too, Harry replied with a chuckle. True, she agreed with a small smile. Well, I, like Ron, support you. You might get a howler from Mum, though, she warned. I'll send one back if I do, he promised. Hermione opened her mouth, then snapped it shut, thinking hard on what she should or should not say. She had already blundered twice, she would really be pushing the limits if she did it again. I wonder if, George started, looking to his twin. We should, Fred went next, sharing silent communication with his twin. Drop out. As well, they finished together. Think about it, George said, this time looking at his siblings. We can stay here, the other twin said, also gauging his brother and sister. With Harry. Help teach him. And finish our educations too, they said together. Not to mention, one twin said, with a wicked grin. The wonderful. Amazing. Never beaten. Marauders are here, they said with great praise. In my opinion, you two are adults, so you can do whatever you bloody well please. However, I'd run that by Sirius first. It's his house, Harry said, beaming at his look-alike friends. Ron and Ginny slumped, they knew no matter how much they begged they would not be able to stay. They shared a look and sighed. Harry, what about Dumbledore? Hermione asked, once more biting her lip. What about him? Sirius is free, and my legal guardian. I already talked to him and he'll support what I want, the teen said smugly. He's the headmaster, she said a bit firmer. Yes, and if I drop out, he won't be mine, Harry stated, folding his arms. Tell me this, what has Dumbledore ever done for me? For all he goes on about having my best interest at heart, he has never, and I do mean never, stopped any of the rumors that have spread throughout school, or the wizarding world. I mean, he could have, at any time, told everyone that I did not put my name in the goblet, or that Parseltongue was not evil. He didn't, instead he let me suffer. I mean. Well, she stopped. Everything he said was true. The headmaster never once stopped Harry from being ridiculed. You're right, of course, she conceded. Like when Ron said the ministry was trying to kill you, I just wanted it not to be true. He's supposed to protect us. It's his job to make sure the school is safe. It's not, and if I could, I'd stay too. But, I think I'll stick with Ron and Ginny, because I know that their mum won't let them stay. She nodded her head decisively, knowing that she made the right choice. Thanks, Hermione. If Harry's not going to be there, we're going to have to stick together. Can you imagine what Malfoy is going to say? Ron said, a look of disgust on his face as he pictured the blonde harassing him and his sister. Well, she huffed, folding her arms and sticking her nose in the air, I'll just have to sock him in his kisser again, she said. The whole room broke out in laughter at the thought of Hermione dropping Draco Malfoy like she had done in her third year. Talks turned to other things, after they played with that image for a while. HP. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Andy had done all she could for the three treasure hunters. They hadn't been as bad off as she first thought, but there were many bruises and scratches that she healed. Andy, now that you've healed them, I have to talk to these guys. Can you give us a few? I don't want to drag them to the study until they are a bit livelier, Sirius asked, still sitting at the head of the table. Okay, she said, tucking her wand in her sleeve. Come, Ted, let's let these men do what they must. Sirius, you will tell me as soon as Nymphateris shows, she asked, waiting for her husband to join her. I'll send her straight through, he promised. The Tonkses left. It was a bitch, Bill said, answering the question before it was asked. How so? Sirius asked, pushing the glasses of fire whiskey towards the weary men. Tom is a marvelous curser. His knowledge of obscure dark curses is vast. How do I know this? Bill asked rhetorically. The curse on the ring hasn't been used in over 500 years. What kind of curse? The dogman asked, shooting back one last whiskey. A withering curse, Moody answered, while Mooney put his head on the table and closed his eyes. Remus and Bill fought over who was going to put on the ring. The compulsion charm on it was that strong. Good thing I'm impervious to such curses. But it took a lot for me to separate these two and bag the ring, he explained, then foregoing the whiskey Sirius poured, he tipped his flask. I'm sure you did great, Sirius said, trying to lighten the mood. I'm not all there, body or mind. I got it done, though, the one-eyed man mumbled, still sipping from his flask. He was too old for this shite. Constant vigilance was exhausting. He saved our lives, Bill said, thumping the older man on the back. Put a sticking charm on everyone's chair, he requested. Moody didn't even bother to ask, he just waved his wand, and everyone was stuck by the seat of their pants. Great, everyone hand Moody your wands, the redhead said, handing his over. Mooney sat up, looked at Padfoot, then the two shrugged and handed the one-eyed man their wands. Okay, thanks, now can you levitate the ring to the middle of the table? Just out of reach, Bill inquired, twitching in his chair to see how stuck he was. Moody looked at him for a full minute, tucked everyone's wand away, and then floated the bag with the ring to the center. Another flick of his wand, the bag fell open. Everyone, bar Moody, leaned forward, so Mad Eye stuck their shirts to the back of the chairs. Bill, fighting the compulsion now that he knew it was there, took a deep breath and centered himself. He waved his hand over the ring, in many different movements. These were spells that were required to learn wandlessly by all curse breakers that worked at Gringotts. If you couldn't do them, you didn't get to go to sites that might have antique treasures. You only got to work at the bank itself until you did learn them. If you hadn't learned them by your second year, you were let go. After 5 minutes of casting, the ring flared bright and the compulsion was gone. Bill slumped in his chair. Sure, he knew how to do it, but wandless casting took a lot out of him. He didn't bother with the withering curse, now that the compulsion was gone, it could stay. Though, he did want to study it. Everyone sighed a huge sigh of relief. That was nasty, Mooney said, once more trying to put his head on the table, but his shirt was stuck fast. So, he leaned his head back instead. Yeah, it's shite like that. Why curse breakers never, and I do mean never, work alone, the oldest Weasley child said, waving his hand and putting the bag back on the ring. It just folded up, like a venomous tentacula over a bug. Then the cord wrapped around the top and they all relaxed. "I didn't know you knew wandless magic," Sirius commented, wiggling around in his chair. The sticking charm was prickly. "Only a few things." "The goblins insisted," Bill said with a sigh. "Box." "Creaker," Sirius called. "Bring me a box, please," he requested when the elf appeared. With a snap, Creaker vanished, and an iron box appeared on the table. Bill levitated the ring in it and closed the lid. "You can release us now," he said, turning towards Moody, whose wand never faltered. A swish later they were all released from their chairs. Then, without being asked, he handed their wands back. Just then the flue flared, wands went up, and Tonks came out of the flames. Kingsley followed her. They too looked like they had been fighting. "We've got a problem," they both said, falling into chairs. If you like, please like and subscribe.